Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really critical and honestly often underestimated part of any tech project: software implementation. This is the moment where ideas become reality. Or, well, where they fall apart. Yeah, and let's just start with a number that should really make you sit up and listen. 42%. According to a Standards Group survey, a whopping 42% of corporate IT projects are just abandoned before they're even finished. We're talking about almost half of all projects that never even cross the finish line. 42%. That is a huge number, Alex. So why? Why is it so high? What is going on that causes so many projects to just stop in their tracks? That really is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the reasons are often surprisingly human. Things like the goals were never clear in the first place, or maybe the stakeholders kept changing their minds. Sometimes there's just a total disconnect between the tech team and the people who actually have to use the software. The root problem is that so many teams try to build these amazing things without a solid plan. So the key is this: you've got to build a system for success right from the very beginning. Otherwise, you're just going to become another one of those statistics. I always like to use this analogy. Building software is a lot like building a house. You would never just show up and start throwing up walls without a blueprint, right? Well, in the software world, our blueprint is a structured process, and it's called the Systems Development Lifecycle, or SDLC for short. The SDLC basically guides you through 4 fundamental phases. So first up is planning. This is where you have to answer the biggest question of all: why are we even doing this? Then you move into analysis, where you figure out what exactly the system is going to do. After that, you've got design, where you map out how it's all going to work. And only then, after all that's done, do you get to the final phase, which is what we're talking about today: implementation. That's the actual building and delivery of the system. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So when we finally get to that 4th phase, implementation, does that just mean programmers sitting in a room writing code all day? Not at all. Not even close. Coding is definitely a big part of it, but implementation is so much bigger than that. It's the entire process of taking that design, the theory, and turning it into a real, functional, working system that people can actually log into and use. It's really where the rubber meets the road. And this slide really breaks it down. You can see how much is really involved. Of course, you've got the actual system construction and testing, but look at everything else. You've got to install the right hardware and software. You've got to handle the sometimes painful data conversion from an old system. And then you have the really critical human parts, training people how to use it and creating clear documentation so they know what they're doing.
Wow. Okay, so the coding part is really just one piece of a much, much bigger puzzle. It's suddenly very easy to see how a project could go off the rails if you overlook any one of these other steps.
Exactly. And one of the most stressful, high-risk moments in this entire phase is what's known as the changeover, or sometimes people call it go live. It's that moment you finally flip the switch from the old system to the new one. And there are a few different ways you can approach that moment, right?
That's right. On one hand, you can do a direct changeover. It's kind of like ripping off a Band-Aid. You just switch the old one off and the new one on. It's fast, but it's super risky if something goes wrong. The other common way is a parallel run, where both the old and the new systems operate at the same time for a while. It's much, much safer because you have a fallback, but it's also way more expensive and basically doubles the workload for your team.
And on top of all those major activities, there are these core technical issues that developers are constantly juggling behind the scenes. Think of them as the 3 big things they're always thinking about. First, there's reuse. Smart teams don't build everything from scratch. They look for existing, proven components they can use. It's faster, it's cheaper, and it's usually more reliable than trying to reinvent the wheel every single time. Then you have configuration management. Just imagine a dozen developers all working on the same code at the same time. This is the system that keeps track of every single change, who made it, and when they made it. Without it, the project would just descend into absolute chaos. And finally, there's this really common practice called host target development. This is just a fancy way of saying you're building the software on one type of computer, the host, maybe your laptop, but it's actually designed to run on a totally different system, the target, like a smartphone or a specialized server. The challenge is making sure that what works perfectly in the lab also works out there in the real world. So, as you can probably tell by now, a successful implementation isn't just one single event. It's a really well-managed, disciplined process with a ton of moving parts. It's the essential, nitty-gritty work that turns a brilliant idea into an actual tool that people can use to get things done.
And that really gets to the heart of it all, doesn't it? The point isn't just to check a box and say, yep, we built it. A truly successful implementation is one that delivers real, tangible value to the organization, whether that means saving money, making more money, or just making everyone's day-to-day job a little bit easier.
And all this leaves us with a really fascinating question for the future. As new tools like AI and these low-code platforms make the actual construction part of software so much easier, does that make the human element of implementation, the planning, the training, the change management, more critical or less? It's definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining us for The Explainer.